So Prince Andrew is a prince no more. It seems that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is how we're going to be referring to him from now on. Yet he's still the eighth in line to the throne. That's not been taken away. In reality, what we've got is a man who's been persistently linked in revelations about his private life, which leave a lot to be desired, not just in his character, but also in the wider institutions that surround Andrew. The reality is that this is not an isolated case in terms of the privileged seeming to get away with things which many people at the grassroots certainly wouldn't. Virginia Giuffre, the victim who has made all the allegations that as a teenager she had sex with Andrew 3 times, has caused the latest furore, of course, with her published memoirs. But it shouldn't take revelations or whistleblowing from a victim who supposedly committed suicide, though you may have doubts about that. But the reality is that the system itself, if it was robust, should have been able to root this sort of thing out long ago. How is it that Prince Andrew, one of the most watched and observed individuals, protected individuals, he likely has 24/7 surveillance from security services. How does a man like that get away with a thing like this? Because, of course, it implicates the security services themselves then. And that's what perplexes me about Western media and its coverage. They seem to be obsessed with his titles and whether he's going to be living in Windsor and he loses his 30 rooms and, you know, how it's going to affect the throne. Yet there's very little talk about why there's been a systemic failure in addressing and dealing with this in a way which is far less sordid in a way, the way it's coming out. And it's not, of course, isolated, as I said. We have the cases of Greville Janner, a very prominent MP, Leon Britton, another one, and Jimmy Savile, of course, nobody can forget that, who were, in a way, on par with Jeffrey Epstein and Trump and all the things that were going on in America and still are. And again, there we're seeing cover-ups, this mysterious inability to get to the lists that Jeffrey Epstein had, the mysterious supposed suicide of Jeffrey Epstein as well. And that links to another British character, Ghislaine Maxwell, who in turn links to her father, Robert Maxwell, media mogul, head of the Daily Mirror Group back in the day, an agent for Mossad. That's also been proved. A man who, again, had links with Mossad, just as, surprise, surprise, Jeffrey Epstein had links with Mossad. Is it that the institutionally prominent are deliberately targeted, blackmailed, used for the whims of security services, intelligence services? And why is it that MI5 or Scotland Yard, or for that matter, the FBI, wouldn't have known about what Epstein and co were doing? How could people like Mandelson, prominent people like that, get away with having these kinds of sordid connections and then have the system pass it off as being just poor decision-making or accident or coincidence? We're supposed to believe these things, and then, of course, people will be labelled as conspiracy theorists if they go too far. But the reality is, I remember the days when investigative journalists were supposed to dig for truth, ask the questions that could get to the reality. And these awkward questions about the security services, the police, the social services, they are being asked. John Wedger, who's appeared on the Deep Dive Perspective here with me, is a prominent whistleblower who's obviously now being given even more prominence, but has been also hounded out by the Met Police and has been, if you like, tarred and smeared for speaking up and speaking out about not just paedophilia at the highest level, but of course at the grassroots level. And what do we see at the grassroots level? Yet another weaponization of sex offence, paedophilia. And how did they do that? Well, all we heard about was Pakistani groomers. That seems to be the obsession now of the right wing. It's a tool used by Tel Aviv Tommy Robinson to whip up more hatred for Muslims and to pin the blame of sexual abuse on a small community within Britain, when in reality, everybody knows, and all the statistics tell you, that sex offence, paedophilia, etc., knows no ethnic boundaries, as it is not any more prominent within a specific group than any other. It's just a phenomena that's there. And of course, it's also problematic that this phenomena, in some circles, also has been subject of the kind of moral relativism that has set in within Britain and the West. Increasingly, we say everything goes, everything's okay, it's all fine, and there are no real absolute moral limitations. But when it comes to abuse of children, and when it comes to abuse of even women, the vulnerable, the mentally ill, we need to have very clear boundaries. We need to re-establish, I think, a very clear set of moral principles as to where we stand on all this. I even heard at the point when we were getting LGBTQ+++, whatever the rest of the alphabet is, that P popped up within that somewhere. And the P stands for paedophiles. So paedophiles have rights. Yeah, I'm not doubting humans have rights. When it comes to sexual abuse, the rights of children, the rights of the unborn children, etc., the rights of those who are vulnerable, for me, always come first. And I think that it's a sad day when in society we're beginning to make excuses for people on biological grounds that, paedophiles themselves, for instance, or sex offenders themselves may have some biological inclination to do what they do. Well, that's all very well, and the doctors and the medical services and the social services and the police can all have a good old discussion about that. But I think protection of the vulnerable, the weak among us, and is absolutely priority. Sympathy for those who are committing the violence does not extend, for me, to relegating the victims into second place when we're considering these issues. So whether we should bring back capital punishment, whether we should be looking at what drives sex offence and more carefully is probably relevant. Both are relevant. And one of the things I'd have to raise straight away is the hyper-sexualization of our society doesn't get any attention. We've said it's okay for porn to be given out freely across the internet. We don't mind that. And a rabbi heads one of the biggest porn sites, if not many of them, which is also quite shocking, where religious fraternity who have supposedly a moral problem with that are actually running these kinds of things, is an issue. Because if you're going to make the sexualization of the public very public and open to all, then you run the risk of damaging children. How many children get to see billboards where they have hypersexuality thrust in their face and justified as a form of advertising? What impact does that have on children? What impact does that have on people who have the propensity for sexual abuse? If they're constantly being hammered every 5, 6, 7 seconds by some kind of sexualized program. I think it has a profound effect. I think we have a responsibility in the public space to reignite the discussion about what sexual parameters are. How much sexuality should there be in public? In what way does it impact society? And in particular, in this case, how does it damage the minds of young people who are now also being given sexual education from the age of 4 in countries like Britain, which I find, quite frankly, quite abhorrent, because a child that doesn't even know how to do its shoelaces shouldn't really be inflicted with this. And then, of course, we get the argument thrown back to us that if we don't educate those children, they'll be more vulnerable and susceptible to child abusers and to, sex offenders at that age. Yes, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The reality is that we then have to ask the question of why so many sex offenders are emerging. What is going on? Why are testosterone levels reducing in this society? Why is estrogen level rising amongst men? What is there within our food systems? What is there within our health structure that is failing? What is creating this rise in what I'd call sexual deviance, which many would probably castigate me for, but I'm a conservative and I stick to many old school traditional values which I think have stood us in good stead for many, many years. And in a society where the welfare state and the government has taken responsibility of these things at the expense of a village society or a community or an extended family or even a nuclear family, then if the government is going to take the responsibility for that, and it's also responsible for sanctioning the widespread hyper-sexualization of society in tandem with transnational corporations which make profit from sex, and I'd say from abuse as well, it seems, given the kind of people who are being caught for it at the highest level, I think there needs to be a massive discussion within society about what actually we believe. And we can poo-poo old school religious societies, we can say that they're out of fashion or they're primitive. But in reality, if we look at our own sexual attitudes, if we look at our own neoliberal secular society and its attitudes, then that 60s revolution, the sexual revolution, seems to have a lot to answer for. This subject runs deep. It's something I can't capture within a few minutes, but it's something that I think needs to be addressed. And in conclusion, I have to go back to this kind of perversion in high places and the cover-ups that go on, and how Prince Andrew, formerly Prince Andrew, now Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, how he was allowed really to get this far. That's a question that needs to be asked. Journalists should be doing the investigation. The police should be up for trial on this. The intelligence services that were watching Andrew should be up for trial on this. And in fact, social services, etc., and the rest of the system should be on trial for the way it's dealing with sex offence generally, and also the way that the whole grooming gangs scandals have been turned into a weapon by the likes of Elon Musk to create potential civil war here in Britain. Putting people up against each other based on race is not okay. And I think that using sexuality and sexualization and the offence against the vulnerable is certainly not acceptable.